Good morning. It's Monique Blessed. I'm sitting here having my coffee. It is January 10th, 2021. Again, Happy New Year's. I'm just sitting here thinking about older Black women. By older, I mean late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I'm coming to the conclusion that many of us, not all of us, but many of us have mammyism etched in our blood to the point where we can't see what's right in front of us. Hold on a minute. Let me get my coffee. Okay, I'm back. We can't see right in front of us. Many of the people I grew up with are in their late 40s, uh, most of them their 50s, and a few of them early 60s. We're all late 50s to early 70s babies. And I listen to some of the things that come out of my girlfriend's mouth, many of them. And I'm thinking, have you been living under a rock all these years? Look at the difficult time you had. Many have raised their children alone, struggled hideously, went without a great deal. I've had friends that wore shoes that were so twisted over their heels were touching the ground to make sure their children had appropriate shoes and clothing and enough food to eat and a roof over their head. And yet, they're very disingenuous when talking to younger Black women. They talk to younger Black women as if, well, you're doing something wrong, you're making the wrong choices, and that's why you're getting the results you're getting, instead of just being genuine and saying there are issues in the community, in the communita, as they call it on YouTube. And these are some of the behaviors I engaged in as I was trying to find my way out of it. And, but you can do better because we're living in different times. First, let me always say interracial dating wasn't always the thing to do. I've had younger Black women approach me and say, well, why didn't women of your generation just open up their options years ago? Because it wasn't accepted by society. That's the short end of it. We had a few brave souls, but as I said before, people would stare at them and, it wasn't considered fashionable to love another race. It's certainly not for white men to love Black women. Are you kidding? Some white men still feel funny about it and will hide the fact that they love or are attracted to Black women. So, can you imagine 30, 35 years ago, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago? Um, but getting back to Black women, the mindset in some of us is very deep and very concerning. I've gone at it with many of my older Black female friends. It was like we were boxing. And the first thing they would say was, well, my son, my grandson. And I would say, but what does that have to do with you and your ability to find a suitable partner and a suitable lover? Your son, your grandson, and your needs are all in different departments. It's not uh, a monolith. They're all in different departments. And some understand, but I think many don't. Now, I'm only speaking about my experiences and many of the Black women I grew up with. As I said, many of them are now in most of them are in their 50s. Um, my youngest brother is 48. So I'm going to say most of them are in their 50s, 60s. I really didn't hang out with people my brother's age. Um, and so I think that Black women are disingenuous because there's a need to validate the choices they made and to feel better about the choices they made. So they're not being completely upfront with younger Black women. I remember saying, gosh, maybe 25 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, there's something wrong in our communities. Our men are not treating us right. They're not marrying us. When I worked in corporate, I had several titles in corporate. And I would notice all of the women would come to work with their engagement rings, the Black girls, the white girls. Um, that's mostly who I worked with. And fast forward a few months later, all the white girls were married, and the Black girls always had an excuse. And I remember saying, something is wrong here. And of course, from the 80s, I remember the magazines that said there's a shortage of Black men, and, because of different issues, the prison, they're in prison, they're gay, just for whatever reason, not available to Black men, and Black men that took advantage of the surplus of Black women. And so I remember quite a few articles from the mid to late 80s. And then let's not forget drugs and uh, crack cocaine when that hit the scene, and the different drug laws that put, you know, many, many, many Black men behind bars. But I remember trying to say something about and address the issues a long time ago within my complete circle. And let me tell you, Black women stomped the hell out of me. They put an end to that line of thinking as if they had a switchblade. Now, fast forward, I'm sure many of those women are still by themselves, never married. Maybe they had a couple of lovers over the years, but we're talking about 25, 30 years. I am so sorry. I am so, so sorry about all of this. Perhaps we could have done better as a collective if we had known better. But most Black women going back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago were just raised to be the Black man's handmaiden, to mule, to what you guys call mammy, um, to help him feel like a man, by serving as a buffer between him and racism. There was an article, not an article, a show that Tony Brown did. This was in the early 70s. I'm going to say 1970, maybe 71. I'm going to see if I can find it and post it. He had a panel full of black women, and he was talking about black women and the issues black women face. And most of the women on the panel were saying they were going to stick by black men no matter what, because of racism, because he has a right to not have his manhood stripped from him, and I will do whatever. Some of the black women were like, I will do whatever I can to restore that manhood for him. But there was one black woman on the panel, beautiful black woman. And as I was looking at her, I was thinking, I wonder if she's still alive. If she is, she's very old, maybe in her 80s, certainly her late 70s. She kept saying, well, what about black women? Well, what are we asking for ourselves? Um, how does any of this address the issues we have? We're not devoid of the impact of racism. What does this do for us? And all of those women on that panel, they pounced on top of her like Muhammad Ali, just shut her down. And I remember going through that when I was younger, consistently with black women, when I started to question that something was wrong, that we were not being treated right by our men. We were not, they were not marrying us. Many of us were being abandoned. Um, they just didn't want to hear it. If you were angry, if you were hurt, they would tell you to forgive and move on. Just forgive and don't blame all black men. So you don't blame all black men. You move on, you meet another one, you get the same results. And then some black woman would come along and tell you the same thing. But then you had maybe one or two, I recall one growing up, that broke out of the mold and said, you know what? I'm just going to look out for myself. She was a free spirit. She had relationships with men that she desired, regardless of race and ethnicity. But in our communities, she was seen a certain way. She was looked at, looked at from the side, like people would side eye her. In some cases, she was called a whore, especially if she was dating. It wasn't even asked or questioned whether or not she was sleeping with the guys, just the fact that she was dating different men. You know, Back in the day, she was called a whore. I see how yesteryears led to many of the issues facing Black women in particular, or impacting Black women in particular in a huge way. And, those women who were free spirited, those Black women who were free spirited, and it wasn't many of them, like I said, one or two, maybe three out of the bunch that said, damn this is not working. I'm just going to find my own way. They walked in silence. They did things in silence. And I don't know, I don't think they necessarily shared what they knew to be true, which goes back to the disingenuous behavior. Um, I heard a YouTuber say, and I want to give credit, I believe it was KSC, said that everything that was done to Black women was done under the watch of Black women. I would have to agree with that. Um, so those black women that broke out of the mold, like I said, one, two, or three of them, uh, they walked in silence. They did not share information, but they always assumed that you weren't going to listen anyway. I remember hearing that a lot growing up. Why bother? Why tell them anything? They're not going to listen anyway, referring to younger black women. And we were all younger black women at one time. Um, and I would wonder, well, why not try? Why not tell this younger black woman the truth, the correct information, and see what she does with it? At least you've done your part. Put the information in her hands and see what she does with it. But why assume, oh, I'm not going to even bother because she's not going to listen anyway? Where does that come from? And I thought about that, and where it comes from is just plain old black woman hatred amongst black women. Many of them don't want you to do any better than they did in life, so they don't give you any information. And they assume that if they give it to you, younger black woman, you're not going to listen anyway, so why bother? I'll reserve my energy, but yet they would go above and beyond and overboard for their sons, letting them stay at home until they're 35, 39, 40 years old, or until the mother died and then they had to leave. This is very deeply rooted. And all of us were impacted by it. I'm getting emotional, excuse me. Let me take another sip of coffee. Maybe that'll make me uh, feel better. All of us were deeply, deeply impacted by it. Some of us didn't pass on information intentionally, and it came from a place of anger. It came from a place of, my life was screwed up. And so, why should you do better? With some of us, it came from a place of, I didn't know myself, so I didn't know how to give you what I didn't have or what I don't have. It's like they say a woman with no self-esteem, a woman who does not have self-esteem cannot teach her daughter self-esteem. And many of us were so hurt by our mothers, sometime intentionally, sometime unintentionally. I want to apologize to the younger black women. I never had children, but I love children, and children love me. I was always the little bird chirping in the corner that would question things, and people would just pounce the hell out of me and tell me to be quiet. But I want to say to younger black women, I listen to many of these YouTubes, and as an older black woman, I want to say I am so sorry. I've never been blessed with giving birth to one of y'all. That was on purpose because I saw what was going on in our community. So I felt from a young woman, well, why am I good enough to have your babies, but I'm not good enough to marry? I started questioning that, not knowing I was way ahead of my time. Many folks that are way ahead of their time don't know that they are. But on behalf of myself at least, and I'll say older black women, I want to apologize to younger black women. Many of us didn't know any better, and so we couldn't offer better. In some cases, our behavior was spiteful. We were angry and hostile and competitive and had been robbed of our youth. I'm not going to say beauty because some of us older black women are still freaking gorgeous. I happen to be one of them, by the way. But we were certainly robbed of our youth. And I think in some cases, thinking back over the years about all the black women I've known that had female girls, that had, excuse me, girl children. I didn't mean to say females. You all know what I mean. I'm a little emotional. I do think in some cases the anger, um, there was a lot of anger displayed and a lot of hatred. Uh, in many cases, self hatred, which got put on many of our daughters. The beauty of black women was not always admired and respected. I love, love, love when I see black women wear their natural hair, the what you guys call 4C hair, and it's wild and it's kinky and it's beautiful. I love seeing that because I remember when that was considered unkept. I remember when you would get fired for wearing braids to work. I remember when you were automatically viewed as radical and that you would be trouble for wearing your natural hair. I remember all of this. So, what I'm saying is, our look, our beauty has not always been respected or admired in this country. And some of us grew up feeling a certain way about ourselves and made decisions based on that. And unfortunately, the lives of our daughters were seriously impacted. And I want to say that I'm sorry. I see the mammyism in older black women, and truthfully, it sickens me. And I argue with them constantly. Constantly. One of them said to me, "Oh, I know black men that are wonderful fathers, that love their wives and take care of their children." And I said, "Okay, wonderful. I guess we all know one or two. That's not a big deal." But I said, "Do you hear anybody say, 'I know wonderful black women that raised their children and loved their children and loved the father of their children, even though he abandoned the relationship a couple of decades ago?' Or do you hear anybody say that about black women when there are more of us holding down the black community?" This person had absolutely nothing to say. I thought interesting. I also know of many older black women. Well, not many. Most older black women I know are single and by themselves, but some have settled for a man that contributes nothing. A black man that contributes nothing, that is nothing, that has nothing. I don't know why. And they justify this by saying racism. Racism did this to him. Racism. But what I find interesting is in some cases, when those black men do well, or they get a certain job, or they come into some money, all of a sudden the relationship with the black woman that stood by them is no longer working out. Is anyone surprised? And they leave her most of the time for somebody that looks nothing like her. Black women, let's stop doing this. Older black women, let's put ourselves first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Okay? Let's love ourselves. Let's make better decisions. If you have children, of course, put your children first. I'm not saying put yourself above your children, but listen, I'm not trying to tell you to compete with your children. That's not my point. My point is to love yourself. You deserve love. You deserve love. Guess what, folks? If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, it doesn't mean that you stop desiring. You still desire a man's touch, a hug. Some people think because you get older, your desire goes away. Nothing could be further from the truth. Sometimes I think it increases because you get all tender inside. Anyway, forgive me, guys. I did get a little emotional while talking to you all. I haven't posted anything in a while. I have been extremely busy, and I've I've had a lot of thoughts, but I've been blocked for some reason while I'm taking care of all my other responsibilities. So anyway, let me know what you think about this video. I'm not even sure what to call it, but maybe I'll just call it I was thinking this morning while having my coffee. How about that? Okay, have a wonderful and blessed day. Let me know your thoughts. Bye.